But when you're in business together, it's like a marriage. It's give and take, and feelings get hurt in their disappointments. And you reach a point where, not in a marriage, you never say that I'm through. But in business, you can say, this is it.
Hello and welcome to the Proclamation podcast. My name is Luke Nolan. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my wonderful grandmother, Joan Connelly. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. I wanted to have you on the podcast because you've been one of the most influential people in my life when it comes to business, and I know that you don't feel that way and don't accept that sometimes when I say it, but there are a few things that you told me when I started in business that I've never forgotten and have really helped me not let people take advantage of me, and also to stay focused. And that's been a huge influence. And so I wanted to share your wisdom with our viewers. And I also wanted to hear some of your story that maybe I haven't heard, and maybe even people in our family haven't heard that you would want to tell. So thank you for being here and sharing your time.
I am pleased to be able to be here.
Were you nervous accepting the invitation to be on the podcast?
Strangely enough, no.
That's awesome.
If I walk into a room of people and don't know anyone, I am so insecure. But sit me in front of a group that's going to listen to me, and I do fine with it. I think I do fine with it. You'll find out before this is over. But I'm not nervous about it. It's so much fun to be with you, Luke.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. Over the years, we've had some really amazing conversations one-on-one with other people in the room, and sometimes just the two of us. And those have shaped me as a person. And one of the goals of our podcast is to encourage people in how they're shaping their lives and how they're interacting with other people. And so I know that, talking to a lot of people, they haven't had those opportunities to have that relationship with their grandparents or even their parents. And so I want to encourage people who haven't had those relationships on how they can maybe connect with people who've had more life experience and can encourage them in that way. And so I really appreciate you being willing to share that with us.
I think that's a great idea.
So we always start with coffee because we're at a coffee shop. So I want to ask you, what is your first coffee memory?
This goes way back, but when I was a young girl, and there were stores that had counters where you could, like Woolworths and Cresses. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
Nope. It will to the older people listening.
What is it likened to today? Like Rite Aid or Walmart? Or?
No, it was a variety store. And then downstairs they had counters where they sold food. And when I went with my parents, I went with my dad on lunchtime. Sometimes we worked together at the telephone company, and we'd walk down to Woolworths and have lunch. He was a big spender. And we'd sit there and have lunch. But when I went with my mom, I'd always order a soft drink because that was a real treat. But she ordered coffee, and I used to think, she can make coffee at home. Why would she pay for it here? I never quite got that.
Was it expensive too in relation to how you can make it at home?
Well, it might have been 10 cents a cup. Yeah. And who knows? I have no idea what it cost at home, but I know that she made several cups at a time. I could not make soft drinks at home.
Yeah.
So when I went to the counter, I got something that I couldn't get at home, but she always got coffee.
Wow. Did you ever try it?
Not that I can remember.
When did you first start drinking coffee you remember?
As a young Mary, we lived in a neighborhood where the gals got together for coffee every morning. And I think the coffee I made might have looked like tea at the time. Yeah. Because unless you're drinking it, you don't know what the strength needs to be. And I used to hear remarks from them about, is that coffee? Oh, well.
Because they thought it was tea.
Yeah. And I think I eventually learned how to do it. I don't know where I got into it, but now I'm hooked.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm here.
That's good. What do you drink at Fourscore?
I drink maple latte.
Okay.
My grandson recommended it.
Yeah. Well, I love the things that we offer that are natural, like the honey or the maple syrup, because it's just so simple. And it's funny because people come in and they're like, I've never heard of that or never thought of that. Not anymore, but when we first opened, you have to be like, maple latte, what's that? And it just seems so easy. You just put maple syrup, make a drink.
Should I accidentally happen to be in another coffee place, I don't quite know what to order because they don't have it.
Maybe vanilla. When you were talking about the ladies coming to your house, it reminded me of a story that you told me once, because you and Grandpa never smoked, correct?
Right.
But when you guys were young marrieds, you had an ashtray in your home because other people smoked. Tell me about what that was like and how did that change, as people discovered that cigarettes were bad for you and stuff?
It was absolutely a way of life. You didn't have a party playing cards. You always had a small ashtray on the card table. Just if you were entertaining, sitting around the living room, the coffee table. Yeah. I had a great big, I think it was called Blanco glassware, heavy colored glassware that was an ashtray that was always available for people who smoked.
Even though you didn't smoke?
Yeah. The neighbors did.
Yeah.
I must admit, I tried it in college, in the student union and playing bridge. I dropped out of college and got married. And that
Where
might
did you
be
go to
the
college?
Reason. Well, just to Sacramento City College.
Okay.
But I only went for 3 semesters. And when I was 18, I got married. And so I quit all those bad habits.
Including college.
Including college, yes.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Stockton, California. Grew up there until I was in junior high school.
Okay.
And then I graduated from McClatchy High School. That's still standing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that where you met Grandpa?
No, he was in the service when his sister and I got to be really good friends through high school. And when he came home on leave, he would drive us where we needed to go. And after a while, he just kept dropping her off and driving me. And like I said, I was 18 when I got married. So when we first started going out together, I was 15. That's a good age to pick out your future husband. You have so much wisdom.
Do you recommend that to other people?
I would be horrified if one of my granddaughters wanted to get married at age 18 and even started serious dating at age 15. Sure. But, that was a different world then. These were young men that were coming back from having been in the war, and they were ready to settle down.
Yeah.
And we were young girls who hadn't had much chance to date, and it was exciting and fun to go out with. And his family knew my family. They were friends in the same church. And so he wasn't a total stranger. And we just dated for 3 years, and then we got married.
That's still quite a long time to date.
It is. It was. Yes.
I guess you couldn't have got married earlier anyways, really.
Well, but I was not the first of my classmate to get married. There were a couple of other gals that got married before me. But it was kind of the thing that we did then.
Yeah.
And now it just seems absurd.
It does.
18. Yeah. Well, that's why the marriage only lasted 67 years.
Only.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that people have changed or expectations have changed, and that's why it's different? Because you said that the men were coming back from the war and they wanted to settle down. So do you think it was the people who were getting married or the expectations of what people should get out of marriage?
I think that they wanted to start building a family. I think they missed family.
Yeah.
And with my husband, he went right to college then. And you're dating in college and getting married he went away out of the state to go to college and would come home on weekends. And it was just easier for him to marry me and have him go there with him.
Yeah.
And so things were so different then, Luke. It was, now some people don't get a college, and I think I had 5 kids by the time I was 29, and I think that some kids don't even finish college by the time they're 29.
That's very true. I haven't finished college yet, and I'm 33.
I know, I remember that. But you've had you've gone to a different kind of college, the college of real life.
Yeah.
And,
So you talked about for a second being a mom of 5. That's a big task. And a lot of people like to throw out there, being a mom is a full-time job. Well, you've had full-time jobs running your own business, and you've been a mom as a full-time job.
Right.
What are the things what are the big differences, and how did you just navigate those challenges of the differences?
Either one of them, you've got to love it. I wanted so much to be a part of a big family. I had one sister.
So your family was small?
Yeah, small family. And I used to read books about large families, and that was just my heart's desire. So having a family, one baby at a time, all of a sudden there were 5. And my oldest was 8 when the 5th one came along. Wow. So they were pretty tightly bunched.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute of it. I really did love being a mom. I wasn't the best mom. I was a procrastinator. I would rather sit down and read a book than change a diaper. And finally you got the essentials take over. But some women are so efficient as mothers. I was not one of those. But we had a lot of fun. And to me, that's what being a mom was, enjoying your kids.
Yeah.
And I see my daughters doing that with their kids. Your mom loves being with you guys.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Warms my heart when I see that happen. And your Aunt Christy is just being such a good grandma, separated from her kids during the pandemic. I am amazed at all the fun things she works out to do with them by distance. But that's in her too. Yeah. Loves being a mom, loves enjoying the kids. And so that job just was natural. They come along and you enjoy them. Sure. And all of a sudden they start leaving the nest. And we left the town where we raised our family when my youngest daughter, that's your mom, graduated from high school. And we moved to Tahoe, and that's where I started my business.
What was your business?
I was able to have a business that was around my second love, and that was fabric. I have always enjoyed fabric. I had a great aunt that was a milliner, and I used to play with scraps.
What is a milliner?
She makes hats.
Okay.
Yeah. And she did quilts too. And unfortunately, my mother's mother died when my mom was very young, 5 years old. And
oh, wow.
So her maidenette, that's what we called an unmarried woman in those days. She raised my mom, and she sewed.
I never knew that.
And your Aunt Christy has finished some of the quilts that great Aunt Ida started.
Whoa.
Yeah, that goes way back.
So your mom, my great grandma, was mostly raised by her aunt.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And she had 2 daughters, my sister and myself. And my sister had 4 children and I had 5. So that bumped up the population.
You both had bigger families.
We did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that your parents would have had more kids?
It wasn't not my parents, maybe other parents.
Or I'm sorry, your parents.
Yeah. It was really kind of frowned on in those days. And
to have a lot of kids.
Yeah. That was through the Depression. things like that.
Another mouth to feed.
And my mother did not enjoy having babies. She really didn't even want the second one, but I'm fortunate that she changed her mind.
Yeah, we all are.
But they were happy with two kids. And there were a few families that I went to school with that had 3 or 4 brothers or sisters. But on the whole, usually there were 1 or 2. A lot of single, only child, only one child. But
wow.
In different times. But then when I was having...
I think people are kind of in that now of only wanting to have maybe 1 or 2 kids.
But when I was having my babies, I was not unusual to have another one and another one and another one. A lot of friends had 3 or 4 kids.
Yeah.
And
so it wasn't strange.
No, people didn't look at us and wonder why we had all those kids. But I loved every minute of it. I really did.
What about running your business? What did you love about that?
Or
hate about it?
I really enjoyed that immensely. I had always sewn, like my 2 daughters. I joke and say that we were all vaccinated with a sewing machine needle. And I just loved working with fabric. And I can remember buying my first yard of fabric for 10 cents a yard. Again, in Woolworths or Cress's, which were variety stores.
And there was a chain of those, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they both were chain stores. Yeah. And, I could make a dress for under $1.
Wow.
And now you can't even buy a spool of thread for under $1.
Yeah.
So anyway, I always enjoyed working with fabric. My mother sewed beautifully. During the Depression, she did dressmaking to supplement my folks' income. The Depression was a time really hard for a lot of people. Fortunately, my dad worked for the telephone company, and he was able to keep his job through the Depression. Hours were cut, so his income was cut, but my mother supplemented it sewing. And she just taught my sister and me how to sew. It wasn't now let's sit down and learn type thing. We just watched her and we knew how to do it. And when it was our turn, we'd finish something. So I always liked fabric, and going into a fabric store, what I would liken it to a gardener going into a garden store.
Yeah.
Going into
a nursery.
Yes, thank you. That's the word, Luke. Yeah. Every now and then the word escapes me.
I think it happens to all of us. It's not just you.
And to this day, in fact, I'm planning on taking a trip in not too long. And one of the first things I looked up was what fabric stores were in the area. And I have a closet full of unsewn fabric.
But you can always have more.
It's just the idea. It's like I used to have a customer that complained about, or said that her husband complained about her collecting fabric, and it bothered her till she realized he collected stamped and he never mailed letters with them.
Yeah.
So I justify that hobby. But if I made a garment every week for the rest of my life, I would not run out of fabric, but I'll buy more anyway.
Yeah.
So the idea of having a fabric store was beyond my expectation. I would have been happy to just work in a fabric store, but that was never an opportunity. But what was the question?
You answered the question, but I have another question, which is, did owning a business that was your passion at home, did it make your passion wane at all? Did you start to kind of feel like this is my job?
No.
Wow.
No, See,
I think people need to hear that, because I think that a lot of people think if I do what I love as work, then I won't love it anymore.
Well, my feeling about starting a business, you start with something you love, and it remains a passion, I believe. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
I still enjoy going in other people's fabric stores everywhere I go. That's what I look for. I'm looking for unique fabrics, but also the way they display it, the way they encourage me. In my mind, I'm still an entrepreneur. Maybe there's still a fabric store waiting for me to own it.
Yeah.
But no, I've never lost my passion for it. But I think some people start a business because it comes as an opportunity, and they take the opportunity to take over the business, but they don't have a passion for what the product is. And I loved fabric, and I still do. I belong to a couple of called wearable art groups where we take fabric and manipulate it to make interesting garments. I do some practical sewing still, but I just love working with fabric. And so being in the store and my location where the store was, I don't know that you ever got to see.
No, I never got to see it. Tell us about that.
Well, it was on the shore of Lake Tahoe.
Not bad.
Upstairs over Jake's restaurant in Tahoe City, overlooking the lake and the marina with all the boats. And
so you had a pretty good view every day.
It was wonderful. And it was such a good retail space because people would wander. It was on the far side of a small mall, and people would wander back to look at the lake. And then the women or the daughter would say, "Oh, look, a fabric store." And it was very good for business.
So you had a lot of impulse sales.
We did.
In addition to, I'm sure you built up a clientele of regulars.
In a community like Tahoe City, are we going to talk about that now? Is that okay if I go on?
Absolutely.
Tahoe City is a very seasonal community.
Okay.
And during the summer, business is wonderful. During the ski season, business is wonderful. And then you have months like March and
kind of
October,
the in-between times.
And where you have to generate your own sales. But there are ways of doing that. We put out a newsletter and we made sample garments. We were able to display. We had a nice display window to display garments.
Did you have classes too, like for people to learn?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, that was the other money maker. And most stores now, if a teacher teaches a class, the store takes a percentage of the fee.
Sure.
And that's good business for the store, but we owned the store. So if we taught a class, we kept all the money ourselves.
That's the
and
best.
That was fun for me because as a housewife, and I use the word reluctantly, but that's what I was in those days, a housewife. I didn't have my own income, and my husband was in charge of our finances. So in the store, it still was our money, but the classes I taught were my money. And I had a little envelope in the drawer, and there were other stores in the mall, one children's store where I could go buy things for my grandchildren and make the decision and spend the money. And
there's nothing like doting on your grandchildren.
Oh, yes, it was wonderful. And making sample garments for them. And it was a sweet mall to be in the early days. We were just blessed to be there. But anyway, I liked teaching also. And my partner taught quilting classes. And this was right at the beginning of the quilting movement. And that was right around the bicentennial, which was 1976.
Okay.
And quilting became a thing, and she was excellent at picking out colors and showing people. She had been an art teacher in high school, so she did that very well. I had sewn all my life, so I really understood clothing construction and things like that. So we had our areas that we taught, and we generated our own classes, and we really supplemented the retail business, not just through sales, but through the classes. And even though we kept the class fee money ourselves, those classes generated a lot of sales. And I'm sorry. Anyway, so it kept the store going, and we were open for about 9 years,
I was going to ask you when you open and when you close.
Yeah.
So.
And we also opened a yarn.
Did you sell it or did you just close it?
We sold it.
You did sell it?
Yes. We were fortunate we found a buyer because if we hadn't sold it, my husband lived in fear I would want to bring all
the fabric
the
home.
Leftover fabric home.
A valid fear.
So luckily we found a buyer for it. We had in the meantime opened up a small yarn store. She liked to knit.
Okay.
And so we were able to have the space we rented first for fabric store classes, and then they took it over as a yarn store. And then they decided they just wanted to do the yarn store. I managed the fabric store for another year until we found
After you sold it. Until
we found a buyer for it. And
was it hard selling a business?
Yes, we didn't know until the last minute because it had to do with the lease. The prospective buyer did not renew the lease. And so they couldn't take over that space, and it was a prime space. So they moved the store to the other end of the building, and I think they only lasted maybe 2 years.
It's amazing how many people think they can buy a thriving business and continue to make it thrive, but they don't always take into account how much the people who already own it have done to make it thrive.
And sometimes they take it over just because they think it might be a fun thing to do or a money-making business. We got into it because we had a passion for it.
It was your passion.
And I was fortunate to have a partner who shared that passion and who had more business savvy than I did. I did not know the first thing about starting a business.
How did you start it? Did you have your own capital? Did you have to get a loan? Do you remember all those details?
We were just fortunate. The way it started was, I'll backtrack a little bit. We had a circle of friends, and one of the ladies wanted me to make a garment for her. And I did, and then another one. And she said, you ought to start your own business dressmaking. And I was thinking about that because I love to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I had taken a job in another field that I was not equipped for. And that's always good to get out of that.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about renting a space to do dressmaking and alterations when one of the husbands in the group said, there's going to be a new mall come in. Have you considered a space like that? And he came by to show me the layout of the mall.
So it wasn't even built yet?
No.
Wow.
No. It was up but not finished. We bought the raw space or leased the raw space, and it was great.
That's a huge risk because you don't know what the demographics going to be or the traffic.
But we thought that lake was probably here to stay.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was.
Anyway, the next day, his wife came up to me and said, I would like to be a partner. And I didn't know what she was talking about or what she meant. She said, in your store. And I said, explain a little bit more. And she said, well, I've wanted to do a business. And I think the fabric store.
Were you guys about the same age?
Yep.
Okay.
Close. So we met together, talked it over, and decided we would go into business together and rent this space. And they had been in business for themselves before, so they had wisdom about starting a business, getting the licenses and all that. And the husband took care of all that, and I was grateful for that because I didn't even know where to start. But I did know fabric. And I had been longing to be involved in the fabric business. And so I made contacts in the fabric world.
Yeah.
And they made contacts in the business world.
Wow.
And that
good partnership.
It really did turn out to be a good partnership.
Were you 50-50 right off the bat?
As far as income or input?
Or your ownership?
Ownership, yeah. right from the very
That's
beginning.
good.
One of the things when we started out, and I do want to share this, they said that it's so easy to start a business with someone else. But the hard part is when one or the other wants to get out of the business.
Yeah.
Because you don't both get to that point at the same time.
Right.
No, circumstance might bring you to that.
Sure. Unforeseen.
Right. But when you are ready to leave the business, unless your partner is also, it's a sticky wicket.
Yeah.
And so they laid out their plans very carefully about what it would take for one partner to leave the business.
A lot of people don't do that.
And they knew that that was important. Unfortunately, they were the first ones to want to leave the business and tried to talk us into other ways of doing it. And my husband had his own set of wisdom and said, this is it. This is the way it's written.
And so he made them stick to the original agreement.
Yes. Yes. And we did not part good friends because of that.
Yeah.
But
which is odd, because you would think that the whole reason of putting it down in writing is so that you don't have an emotional debate about it, but you just go to the documents and say, this is how we do it.
Yeah. But when you're in business together, it's like a marriage, it's give and take, and feelings get hurt and their disappointments. And you reach a point where, not in a marriage, you never say that I'm through, but in business, you can say, this is it. And we had reasons for seeing that selling the business might be the best thing to do. Living at Tahoe has a lot of challenges, and we had elderly parents back down in Sacramento.
You wanted to be near them.
Grandchildren that were coming along. And so we decided that leaving the area and moving back down into the Sacramento area was probably a good move for us.
Yeah.
And so it worked out all right. They're happy now. My partner was extremely talented with knitting, and she teaches internationally. She has sailed far beyond than she would have if she stuck with me.
That's great.
But I'm a happy camper.
Yeah.
I have been able to teach classes, volunteer basis, in the communities that I've lived in, and I just love sharing things with people and teaching them how to do it. I don't do it for financial reasons. I do it for the love of sharing and seeing someone pick up on something that I know how to do, and because I've showed them how to do it.
Do you think that a lot of people miss the personal connection between themselves and their clothing because they always just purchase clothing from a store and they don't understand what it takes to create something?
I think they have a real misunderstanding about the cost of, we'll say, homemade garments or custom-made garments.
Yeah.
Somehow they feel, because they're not professionally made or commercially made, that they should be less expensive. And
which is odd, because if a custom woodworker built a table, you would always think, oh, that's going to be much more expensive.
Any other field.
Yeah.
But because women sew at home, because it's a money-saving thing, a customer feels that they should share in that money-saving thing.
Yeah.
And it's really the opposite. It's risky sewing for someone else, and then they don't like it. And you've spent hours. You can spend a lot of time doing sewing for others. And so I never got tired of sewing for myself, but I don't enjoy sewing for other people at all. And it's work.
Yeah.
But for myself, for my grandchildren, it's fun. And I've never tired of that. Where in other businesses, you might get tired of doing that. But
I think a lot of people don't understand how much work it takes to produce any type of product. And so when that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, running your own business, making your own products, how does it change your view, or how has it changed your view of other business? When you walk into a business, for example, when you came into my business, you see things that other people don't see. How has that helped you in the way that you've consumed? Because now you're more a consumer, And so how have you changed your behavior, or how do you view businesses differently, having run your own business and knowing the challenges that are happening behind the scenes that no one else can see?
There are in a couple of directions. One is the product itself. There are some stores that are really pricey. Can I mention the name of a store?
Yeah, that's fine.
Like Anthropology.
Sure.
If you can buy a blouse in there and pay $150 for it, and people just are horrified. I look at the way it's constructed and I see the work that's gone into it and the design and the quality of the fabric. And you can go to Walmart and buy a simple garment that is serviceable, and you'll get just as much pleasure out of it as you will. So I do that for basic things. For a T-shirt, I'm not going to make a T-shirt. I can buy one for $9.99 at Walmart.
Are you saying some of the really expensive stuff isn't made quality, or is made quality?
Is incredibly.
Got you.
No.
So people look at that $150 and think, why is it so expensive? But you can see what's gone into
don't see
the
way,
details.
yeah. I'm sorry, I'm talking over you.
No.
They don't see the way the seams are finished. They don't see the quality of the fiber that the garment is made from. And they don't see the handwork that's gone into it. And a lot of the ones...
It's not machined.
Right. Yeah. And so when I look at ready to wear things, first of all, I look at the design and the construction. Is it complicated? Sometimes I'll steal that idea when I make a garment, because that's part of it, is the design.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that in a garment, and I appreciate the quality of the fabric. And so my love of clothing has not changed, and my love of fabric has not changed. But it's more fun now because I can pick out things and combine them for my use. In the store, if we made a sample that had buttons down the front of it, at first I would just use buttons that I had at home. And then a customer comes in, wants to buy the pattern, the fabric. Where are the buttons? Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
They were out of my button box, and they can't see another button on that. And so it limited your creativity to what you had available for the customer to duplicate. Not all customers are that way. There are a lot of creative women out there. But now I'm in a group where I can use fabric I've had for 20 years if it works with the garment I'm trying to put together.
Wow.
And it's fun to be able to do that. So I love making my own clothes in that way and making them a little bit unique. Just fun for me, putting fabrics together.
I like the idea too of, and I think this is sort of a purely hipster viewpoint of having a style and having garments that are unique to you as a person and that no one else has.
I do too. In fact, I thought it over today coming here.
You're wearing some garments that you've made, aren't you?
No, these are all commercial garments. And I have the 3 sort of jackets that are ones that I put together, combine the fabrics and everything. I thought, oh, that's too over the top. He's not going to talk about.
You'll have to wear that for the next episode.
Right. But it's fun to be able to do things like that. I don't do it to get compliments. I think a lot of people misjudge why you do things. But I'm always happy to get compliments. But I do it to please me. And if I don't like it, the way it turns out, that's okay. Yeah. I've liked the challenge of making it. And some things turn out much better than you think they're going to. And I think that's true, whether it's building a house or building a garment. And I don't use lumber. I just use fiber.
Yeah.
But I really love every minute of it.
That's one thing I've really appreciated about my grandparents being craftsmen and just learning how to take your time and appreciate things, and it doesn't always have to be fast, but it does have to be done right.
Your grandfather was that way with wood.
Yeah. Now my brother has picked up on that much more than me. He's much more of a craftsman, and I'm a little more in a hurry. But
your grandfather couldn't make coffee.
Well, there's my advantage. I can make really good coffee.
Yes.
I think that a lot of people are caught up in what's fast and what's easy, what's cheap, and because of that, they lose appreciation for quality, and then they are wondering why are things falling apart, or why don't things why aren't things sustainable? That's one of the things I was thinking about as you've been talking, is how a lot of people are concerned now about the impact that we're having on our environment and on the planet by constantly producing new things and not reusing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to bring attention to something that's in our surroundings, which is this coffee can. And I don't know if you remember, but you gave me that. And I was thinking about the fact that that's metal and it's super old.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that people at one point looked at that and thought, well, that's too expensive to put coffee in a metal can, or that's not sustainable to put coffee in a metal can. But I mean, we have people purchasing coffee in paper bags that go to the waste by the millions, and yet this will last beyond both of us because it's metal, and it could be refilled again and again and taken to someone's home, and so I think that maybe people are starting to realize that we need to kind of revert back to some of that.
There is a movement in the sewing world now called upcycling.
Upcycling?
Buying a thrift store garment and repurposing it, combining 2 or 3 thrift store garments, or taking a garment of your own and putting it, adding to it or recutting it, or just upcycling it in. In fact, I almost wore the upcycle jean jacket that I have that I've added stuff onto. And I thought, no, I want to be plain and simple. I don't want to distract. Oh, well, next time. But that's
a movement.
They're really, yes, absolutely. As I said, I belong to 2 groups that are called wearable art groups. And we make garments for the creative side of it, not just stylish, but some of our beautiful craftsmen that are in that. But we usually start the year with challenges, make something in black and white, or make something out of a different type of...
Gives the group direction and focus too.
Yes, and one of them is upcycled. And so everyone will make a garment that they have upcycled. And it's just really fun when we get together and see how people have taken these challenges.
Are you usually surprised by people's creativity?
I am amazed by people's creativity. It is just so much fun to see what some people can do with something that you wear every day that's pretty ordinary, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, look what she did with that. It's just fun to see.
I think, again, it's just I think another bigger lesson of people stretching their minds and being creative instead of just purchasing something and putting it on and going about their day, and maybe they go create something else. But I think that I was listening to someone who was talking about how when you wake up and you've had a dream, there are all these very small details that you remember from your dream. And it's because in your dream, in your dream state, your mind is much more active than any other time. And so you see all of these details in your dream state that you don't when you're awake. And so they were saying that one of the ways you can, if you feel like your mind is becoming sluggish, one of the ways that you can become more attentive, or that you can become more alert, is to notice a lot of details. And so as you're just walking about your home or your work, to just notice details and consciously think about them. And that can help sharpen your mind for whatever else you need to do. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I think a lot of people have lost they've lost a sense of their surroundings. They're not very aware of what's going on.
You're right. Yeah.
And so I think the more that we can, I think that's why people appreciate artisans like us, because they see that we have attention to something specific, coffee, fabric. We're looking at something and saying, how can we be very, very intentional with the details of the product?
Woodworkers are a great example of that too, on such a big scale. It's hard to work with a big piece of lumber and get it down to what you want to make out of it. But if a man walks into a store where there's unusual furniture, every August there used to be an event down in San Francisco put on by the American Craft Council. It's fallen by the wayside with the COVID, but maybe it'll come back. But they had lots of garments that creative garments that women have made, lots of jewelry. But one of the and my husband walked with me slowly through this, trying to be nice, let Joan look at what she wants to see. Well, he and his oldest son walked into the next building, and it was woodworking. And they almost went out of their minds. Did you see this?
Wow.
Just fascinated by it. And I think it's wonderful when people appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into items that are handmade that you might not even be aware of. And this is someone's creativity, someone's idea to begin with, and someone has executed it, and there it is. Sometimes the price tag is huge, and you think, ooh, I would never pay that for that item. But you can't judge creativity by the dollar sign on it.
There's been many times in business and in life as well, in general, where people have insisted that I discard something because they want to replace it with something else, or because they think it's in the way, or, add whatever reason. And I often look at, well, what would it take to replace that product? And usually it's not monetary. Sometimes it could be, but are we just doing it because we're tired of it? Can we change it in some way? Can we move it to another part of the house or the business?
Yes.
Is there why are we doing it? Is it just because, and sometimes people are new to the environment, so they want to kind of make their mark and affect change, and let's get rid of all these things. And so one of my kind of mantras has been, don't do work twice. So if we get rid of that table and we're going to replace it with another table, that's just twice the work. If its function is to be a table and it's doing that fine, I don't care how it looks. It needs to just fulfill the function of being a table. And so let's not do the work twice, spend twice the money just because we want to change something, or we want to move things around because we're bored. And so it's helped, I think, us with our efficiency of just, you know what, let's just leave things the way that they are.
Yeah.
But we need to do this and we need to do that. Well, why? Well, because we're bored, and so we've learned not to do that anymore. And it's always a struggle when new people come in, but it's something I try to teach. Don't do the work twice. Yeah. Someone else already made it. We don't need to make it again.
No, that's just a great way to look at it. Yeah. If it's a problem, you can modify it, but that doesn't mean you necessarily get rid of it. You modify it so it works.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a friend who has purchased about 8 different bedspreads, each one perfect for her room. Each one is perfect for a bedspread to sleep under or have in your room. I've had the same one for about 10 years. So I love it. It does the job. I'm not unhappy with the way it looks. And every time I go to her house, not every time, but over and over again, look at my new bedspread. And it looks great. No, it's an improvement. And she gets great satisfaction now that I don't need to diminish that. For some people, it's almost necessary to make changes. Yeah. But change just for change's sake is not necessary in life.
I think some people, they just enjoy getting new things. And I think some people are dissatisfied inwardly, and therefore that is a way that they're expressing that. It sounds like your friend just likes changing it up.
She does.
But I know that there are a lot of young people who maybe could benefit from hearing your answer to this question, which is, how can we be content with what we have and not always try to be changing things in order to fulfill an inner need?
Yeah. I think maybe sometime is to choose more wisely when you first get something. Wow. Don't reach for the bright, shiny object.
Or the first thing that comes along.
Right. That catches your eye. And think about, how long am I going to like this? Do I have things that are going to work with this? Will it be enduring? Will it meet my needs in time to come? Those are maybe decisions. We are such a materialistic country.
Yeah.
That I think that we are that's why advertising is so big. How many people that bought a new car really needed a new car?
It's funny you say that, because I have a Toyota. It's a 2018, so it's 2 years old. And I got a call from them yesterday, and they said, "Hey, just checking in, making sure everything's great, going well with your Toyota." "Yeah, it's great. And I'm coming there next week to have service done," which is probably why they called me. I'm sure they have their little system.
Right.
And so this young man I could tell he was much younger than me, and he was always trying to figure out the next, to keep the conversation going. And so it started out with, "Well, do you have any needs for another vehicle?" "No, I'm doing fine." "Well, have you thought about trading in your Corolla for a newer car?" And I said, "You mean my 2018? It's practically brand new." And he said, but Mr. Nolan, you could be driving a newer car."
And I
said, "You know what, Ryan? On a hot day when the car heats up on the inside, I still get the new car smell. So I'm not going to be trading it in."
Great.
And he laughed. And then he said, "Well, have you heard about our new vehicle that comes with a $10,000 gas card?" "Yeah, the Ferrari, where there's only one place to fill it up, and it's at the Toyota dealership." And he said, well, they're building new stations all the time. And he was trying so hard. And the last one was that he said, "Well, we have a deal going right now, Mr. Nolan, where if you buy a new Prius, we give you $5,000 back." And I said, "My wife will divorce me if I get a Prius." "Well, why is that, Mr. Nolan?" "Because she likes gasoline and she likes to go fast." And he laughed, and he said, "Well, it doesn't sound like there's anything we can do for you." And I said, "No, you guys have done a lot. You've done a great job. I don't need a new car. My car's got 40,000 miles on it, and it's going 200 more. So thank you, but I don't need a new bright, shiny car."
Right.
I've already done that, and it turned out poorly.
But how many people out there, I'm inclined to say men, but women are suckers for it
Grandpa
too.
did that, right? He liked to get new vehicles.
No, he used them a little bit longer than you're talking about.
2 years.
Yeah. He was a little more frugal than that, but he never bought a used vehicle. They were always new vehicles.
And they were nice. They smelled nice.
Yeah. And that was it. But I do feel in so many areas, just homes are an example also. Yeah. I watched the House Hunters program where some couples go through in a 60-year-old house with 2 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms. And they say, "Oh, isn't this great? This now Susie can have this room and Johnny can have that room." And, they're in their mind, this house is going to work. And then there'll be another couple that will walk into a mini mansion and look around and say, "Well, this will never do. I've got to have the tile removed from the kitchen because it has to be granite." like tile can't hold the dirty dishes. It has to be granite for them. And if people want to live that way, that's their business. But I do think as a culture, we've gone way too far in that direction. But it still sells.
My cousin, he bought his first home, and next door, it was the original owners. They'd own it for 60 years, and they sold it and moved wherever. And the people who bought it were going to flip it. So they put in new cabinets, new countertops, new floors, they painted, and then they sold it. They made a ton of money, and they sold it maybe like 8 months to a year later. And the people who bought it came in and they ripped everything out and redid it all.
Oh no.
And it was just amazing because they paid a premium over what that house was worth, a year before, because they wanted to change everything. And then they ended up spending more money changing everything. Yeah. And it's just crazy,
Yeah, it's so true.
Everybody wants it their way. We're going to take a quick break and have a sip of coffee, and then we'll come back and finish up with 2 more questions.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Luke.
Welcome back to the Proclamation podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nolan, and we are here with our guest, Joan Connelly.
That's
my
me.
Grandma. More importantly, thank you for being here.
I am honored to be invited.
And we've been having a great conversation so far, and I want to ask you a few more questions, if that's all right.
Okay.
So the first question I want to ask you is, right now we're in the midst of a pandemic, and
Yes.
COVID has been pretty crazy for a lot of different people. And I think it's great for people to hear about other people's experience with COVID. So would you tell us about having COVID and how it's affected your life, where you live, and how it's affected your community?
Okay. I live in a retirement community in a lovely facility. They've been very careful with us, and I thought I was being careful too. In early December, I went out to take care of some business, to mail some packages, stopped for breakfast on the way. And it was just a busy day, and I couldn't mail the packages where I first went, so I had to go to a different post office, packed with people. And my feeling was, well, what difference does it make? We had masks on and everything. Sure. But the following Saturday, the manager of our facility came to my door with a letter and said, "You have tested positive for COVID." I was shocked.
So how often were you being tested at that point?
I honestly don't remember, Luke. Maybe a couple of times.
Okay.
I mean, it was still pretty new. It wasn't
every day or anything like that.
No, it was pretty new doing that.
Yeah.
And no one else. I was the only one in the independent living part of that community that got COVID.
How many people do you think live in that?
I think there are about 36 in that unit. And the other part of it was assisted living, and mainly people with issues, physical. And we lost 2 people, but they had been taken to the hospital for other reasons.
Gotcha.
And but in the meantime, they test the kitchen staff all the time. If anyone tests positive or has been exposed, they very carefully let us know. We've gone into quarantine several times because of being exposed to someone who might have had. So the record where I am is excellent. I am the black mark on the record.
Oh, really?
But fortunately, I had a very mild case.
What were your symptoms?
A very slight fever. Some people have raging fevers. I did not have. They supplied me with a thermometer, which I was later billed for.
Oh.
I thought, come on now.
You didn't have a thermometer?
I had one that I used with my children when they were small.
Yeah.
And
but they gave you a new one.
But they got me a new one, and I checked it daily, sometimes 3 times a day, just feeling like I was getting feverish, but I never had a strong high fever. It's kind of settled in my throat, and I did have a sore throat most of the time. Some nasal problems, no cough. A lot of people talk about having
Taste
a cough.
And smell?
No smell problems. No, I kept thinking I can't have it. I can smell. Walk in my door and smell the coffee. Yeah. That's a good test.
Yeah.
I just, so I got through it, and 2 weeks later they tested me, and I did not hear the results of the test. And so I wondered what it was. And then a week later, they tested everyone again. And finally, I asked the nurse doing it, I said, when will I know what the results are? And she said, if they're positive, they'll tell you. But if they're negative, you won't hear.
They just don't say anything.
And they don't. So I must have been negative then.
That's great.
Because I hadn't heard. But I was in quarantine for the appropriate period of time.
You never went to the hospital?
Never had to go to the hospital.
That's great.
I had a minor stroke a month earlier to that and was in the hospital with that. And
what was it like being in the hospital during COVID?
Terrible. I mean, they are so busy, and, no
visitors.
No visitors at all. And, they were pushed. I got good care there. There's no question about that. But it was not a good place to be. They're
much different.
Yeah. Much different than, when I was in before, once I was in with a broken leg, and they kind of bathed you every day. They would have the washcloth, and you would, this time, I think they gave me a washcloth so I could wash my face. That was the extent of it. I mean, they just don't have time to do things like that.
Too impacted.
And I was okay with it. I had a telephone. What else do you need? And, but as far as having the COVID, I did have such a light case, but it has impacted my stamina. I have to walk a distance to go to the office in the building that I'm in. And by the time I go down there and walk back again, I'm tired. My lungs are tired. I have to sit down. My voice starts getting raspy because my throat has been affected by it. Mm-hmm. And I'm really surprised by those things because I had such a light case of it.
Can't imagine the people who had a severe case.
Oh my gosh, yes. For the ones that they call the long haulers.
Yeah.
What they go through, I mean, their whole lives are, even if they recover, their lives are changed by it. Mine, the changes are minor, but I definitely feel them. And I'm kind of surprised. I thought I used to be able to do this with no problem. What happened? Oh, COVID happened.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you get vaccinated?
I have, with the COVID vaccine, both shots,
Wow.
So I'm in pretty good shape. I'm recovered and have recovered immunity from that, and I have had both my shots, and the last shot I had was February 3rd, so it's been a long time.
Why do you think a lot of people are concerned about getting the vaccine?
Well, I think that because sometimes there are problems from the vaccine, and I saw this happen when kids were given polio vaccines. When you guys were little, or when your mom was little, there were mothers who didn't want their children to be vaccinated against polio. And
so that's not a new thing, being anti-vaccination.
No, absolutely not. And sometimes
I think people would be really fascinated to hear that. So I'm glad you said that. Well,
sometimes there were what you might call horror stories where a child was perfectly normal and was vaccinated and had major problems and from that point on were never normal again. And that's horrible. But the flip side is the millions of children
who had
that
polio.
would have gotten polio or even measles or whatever the communicable disease was. So many were not affected that might have been for the few that were. But if you deliberately take your child to be vaccinated and that something goes wrong, I would think that you would question that for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Or if you know someone that it happened to. And there's no way to know.
Yeah. Did you know anyone who had polio growing up?
Yes. When I was in high school, Earl Warren was governor of the state of California, and his daughter had polio, his youngest daughter. And I went to high school with those kids.
Oh my goodness!
Drove in the governor's mansion on a double date one
really?
time.
All right.
Yeah. In fact, at my last class reunion, there were only 4 of us left, and one of them was Earl Warren Jr. and
his son.
His son.
Okay.
And but then there were a couple of others, and one of my friends, a mom, got it, and she had a serious case and had children to care for, had 4 children. The children didn't get it, but the mom got it.
Wow.
And then another friend of mine was at a gathering where one of the children had been vaccinated with the live virus. And I do not remember what my friend's problem was. Oh, I know, she was newly pregnant. And she picked up the polio virus and is still embraces to this day.
Wow.
So, they're wonderful for what they prevent, but sometimes
there's always exceptions.
There is. Just having a child is risky.
Yeah.
So, as far as taking the COVID vaccine, I have no hesitation about that at all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how polarizing, it seems like the last year, a lot of things have been polarizing that weren't before, but that has been something where it's become politicized, where it's like, if you support it, you're this way. If you oppose it, you're this way. And that seems very just contrary to
it's hard to
logic.
Putting labels on people's personal decisions is just dangerous.
It is. It's happening a lot.
But yeah, it didn't bother me. I put my arm out there. I wasn't even sore.
That's great.
Some people spent all day in bed because of it.
Yeah. We're all different.
Yeah.
So you've been through a lot in your life, and you beat COVID. So you can add that to your bucket list.
Right.
Cross it off, I should say. And I think that people would be interested to hear what you want your legacy to be to your family when when they look back on your life.
I would like to feel that my kids loved me and knew that I loved them. That's it.
That's it.
I also have to bring up my personal faith. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and not all of my children do. And so that would be something that I would wish for all of them, that they would know Christ as their Savior. And our family went to church. The Nolan family was in that same church, and I knew the Nolan kids. And in fact, one of my daughters married one of the Nolan kids, which is why I'm here with you.
And here I am.
But, that's the legacy is of the faith that I have, the hope that I have in in salvation through Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior.
How does your faith affect the way that you love other people, including your kids, but other people as well?
I try to look at them not being judgmental. And darn, that's hard because my first inclination is to try to be judgmental or to wonder why, and try to look at them understanding that we're all created by a loving God, and we have differences. And where I live now, I live in a senior residence, and a high proportion of the people are aging out. I'm one of them, but I don't have to sit in a wheelchair. Thank you. I can comb my hair and get myself dressed. Some of them can't even do that. And people would look at them as, maybe think she's a bag lady because she's so disheveled, or make fun of him. There's one old guy who's got long, skinny legs, wears shorts all the time, and you look at those people and it's easy to kind of write them off as not necessarily making an effort to get to know them because they don't fit the mold. We don't see them as they were as a younger person. And I'm straying maybe from what you asked, but personally, I have been trying to connect with those people and listen to their histories. And some of them are just fascinating, where they've been, what they've done, what their family history is. And it's really easy to categorize older people as being too old to care about.
Yeah.
And I look at them and I think but the grace of God, go I. I mentioned I had a stroke.
Yeah.
It affected vision in my left eye, and I can't drive because.
When did you have the stroke?
I had it in September.
Okay.
And
we're in March now, so it hasn't been that long.
No, it was a couple of months before I had COVID. But I can't drive anymore. And darn, I miss that. As you know, I had to get rid of my car.
Yeah.
And I'm dependent on other people. But I don't have to be pushed in a wheelchair. And I'm grateful for that. I went through that when I had a broken leg, and I know what that's like. But I haven't aged out yet to that point.
Have you seen other people your age who have had similar struggles, but the way that they responded to it or the way that they view it is different from you? Like they always take it. You seem to be finding the positive, saying, I can't drive, but I'm not in a wheelchair. Yeah. Have you known people who've always responded the opposite way?
Yes. And where I live, there are some of those that never have anything positive to share and complain about any irregularity, and this has been a tough time.
Sure.
For people who aren't happy with themselves.
Yeah.
Being in quarantine, I really enjoy things that I do. I love to sew, I love to read, I watch television. There's some wonderful stuff on television if you make the effort to find it. And a lot of people don't make the effort. And I feel sorry for them because it's torture for them to be locked in their room, have meals delivered in a styrofoam box. And it doesn't bother me at all. I like being out. I like being with people. But I don't mind being alone. We just found out we can have visitors in our room now.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, darn, I have to straighten things up now. I've had several months where no one's coming. Why do I need to pick up everything and put it away? So,
Katie and I have learned the best way to clean our house is to invite someone over.
Have company, yes. And I've always had that approach, and my husband did not understand it, but he's not around to watch. But now they will just this week, we have reached the point where we are allowed to have visitors in all the way in our room. Up to this point, they've had to have 24 hours notice, and we would visit in one of the public areas that they put aside for that. So it's things are opening up, but we've had a very good record where I am. It's at the villas in Rockland, and they have been very careful about us.
I think it's good for people to hear about the wins. I mean, there's been a lot of negativity, obviously, in the news because that's what people seem to want to hear about. Yeah. But there's also a lot of places like where you live that have done a really good job of protecting their residents.
Yeah, our manager has, taken it on the chin. He's had to make tough decisions.
Really?
About, closing the dining room and not allowing people to leave or strangers to come in, and some things that made people unhappy. But he stuck to it and has done an excellent job of trying to keep us all happy. But it's been a long process, hasn't it? My gosh. Yeah,
I don't think any of us thought it would last this long.
I thought the 1st of May last year that there was going to be something that would cause that virus to lose its effectiveness.
Yeah. It didn't happen.
But it didn't happen. Yeah. You're right. But,
it was amazing. That's been a year.
And even though there have been millions of vaccinations, there's still are millions more that, we're not at herd immunity by a long shot. And it'll be wonderful when that happens. But the numbers have certainly decreased, but there are too many people dying from it every day.
Yeah.
And I am grateful that my number isn't in those because it could well have been.
Yeah.
So,
do you know people who've passed away from COVID?
Yes. There are a couple. There's in our church, there have been 2 people that have. And, don't know them as close friends, but, you've seen them around and know who they are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been enlightening to hear different people's perspective and how it's affected their family and people. I talked to a guy the other day who said he's had 5 family members pass away from COVID, which is just incredibly devastating.
That is hard to imagine.
Yeah, and I think that his family was late to like not gathering and stuff like that is kind of what he alluded to.
Yes.
And so, he just kind of said, we paid the price basically. So,
but Luke, I'm going to bring up a family situation that isn't COVID, but on one weekend in my life when I was in my early 20s, my husband's grandfather died on like Wednesday of the week. The family was preparing to take his body down to San Diego to the family plot. My brother-in-law, married to my husband's sister, was a Navy jet pilot, crashed at sea that weekend. My only other brother-in-law, who was married to my sister, was killed in a head-on automobile collision that weekend. We lost 3 family members within a week. And so when you hear about the numbers that are lost from COVID, I'm not saying it's the same, but it happens.
It does.
Being part of a family, you'll hear about an accident where 7 family members are killed. There was one that happened not too long ago that was in the news that I think 5 family members. So COVID has taken a lot of family members, but we're doing it to ourselves also when we get in the car.
Yeah.
We take risks when we're driving.
Do you think that's one of the reasons that people have been so over the top in their response to COVID is because they feel like maybe this is one of the only things that they can control and they feel like the rest of it was out of control and they think if we all just stay home, nobody's going to die?
Yeah, I don't know. Just within our own family, we have such different mindsets.
Yeah.
Your mom goes to work every day, and you're out and about.
Yeah.
You're in contact with people. You have an aunt and uncle, that live up in Cool, and your Aunt Paula has been confined since last March.
Yeah.
Because she's vulnerable, and Mike is extremely careful. He goes out to golf, but he's out of doors.
Yeah.
He doesn't go into the clubhouse afterwards. He comes right home. He goes into the garage, changes his clothes completely, so he's not bringing any germs in, cleans up before he goes in the house to be with her.
I've heard a few people who've been doing that.
He's being extremely careful. That is such an act of love.
Yeah.
To be that careful of your partner that way. And, but then you have your other aunt and uncle, Christy and Mark, up in Portland. They just are getting their second shot. I don't know if they got it yet, but it's coming.
On its way.
And they've had the first one, the appointment for the second one. And they're going to wait their 2 weeks' time and be in the car to visit their grandchildren.
Very nice.
They cannot wait to see these grandchildren that they have not been able to see.
Yeah.
And they're going to be coming down and seeing me on Mother's Day weekend. They're going to be here.
Very nice.
So, they have immunity from the vaccine, but we all know it's not 100% immunity.
Sure.
But they have been careful for a long time. And there are others, like your family, because of the economics of it.
Yeah, just out and about.
Yeah, you're out and about, and thank the Lord you have not contacted it.
Yeah, I mean, if I haven't had it, I would be so shocked.
Yeah.
But I've never gotten very, very sick, so I don't think I've had it.
Hey, listen, I remember when you had malaria and you were in my house writhing with a fever.
Long time.
And, I remember taking you to the hospital that one night when you were just burning up with fever.
Yeah.
And your mom and dad weren't around.
Yeah.
And, so don't tell me you don't get sick, kiddo.
Grandpa picked me up. I don't know if I told you this story, but he picked me up from the hospital in the middle of the night because they said you can stay overnight or you can call someone to take you home about 1 a.m. or some very late hour for Grandpa.
Yes.
And he came and picked me up, and we turned out of the parking lot, and the first light we came to was like Lead Hill and Rocky Ridge.
Yeah.
And he always covered the brake at lights. And he was covering the brake, so he was slowing down, but he didn't stop. He went right through that red light, kept driving on home, and I thought, well, I've dodged 2 bullets. I almost died of malaria, and I almost died on the way home. And I said, Grandpa, I think that was a red light. What was it?
Oh gosh, that's so out of character for him.
It was a very late hour.
Yeah.
So we had a good laugh.
Oh gosh. No, well, you've been sick before, but
yeah.
And let's hope you don't experience COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
But the chances are getting narrower and narrower because more and more people, but also a lot more people are not wearing masks. And, I noticed your customers today, I wore my mask, and then I noticed none of the other customers. And they're thinking, look at that old lady. She's got her mask on.
A lot of people wear them and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
It's wild. Well, I want to ask you one more question.
Okay.
It's about Foursquare.
Yes.
How has Foursquare impacted your life, and what are some of the things maybe you've seen change over the years? Well,
of course, you changed. The location has been the same, but the layout has changed enormously. I loved that little hole in the wall that you had when you first started out.
Yeah. It was special.
There was really no place to sit. A little bench against the wall, I think, and benches outside.
Yeah.
But there was no place to set up your laptop.
Your whole office.
When I walk through the Lincoln Library here, there's hardly a table that doesn't have a device on it that someone's working on. Big change.
The office away from the office.
And of course, the other side, the business side, used to be full of people and tables, and I miss that.
Yeah.
Walk in and it has sort of an empty feeling. And if people don't know that there's the space over here, they might miss it altogether.
Yeah.
And yet it's always got people in there nicely spaced. I love what you did to keep the desks separated so people can go and sit down and work without anyone facing them. I think you've done a good job of keeping things as widely spaced as you can in a tough time. But the signage that you have is excellent, but you started out early on having really, you're careful with the signs. I think a handmade sign has some charm to it, but it
not as professional.
It diminishes, the professional feeling of the place. I think you've made good choices in the beverages that you offer. And I know we've talked about it would be nice if you could offer food.
Yeah.
But your answer was if people could buy lunch there, they'd never go home.
Never leave, yeah.
And I think that's just a great that you're sensitive to that, because people shouldn't
changes the environment, yeah.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be sitting there all day long. And anyway, that's a big change, though, that's happened. The decor has gone through different changes. The tables have changed. And I used to love the area at the end where you had the sort of provincial sofa, and the chandelier is still there, but the whole feeling of that was not a practical setting, but it was charming.
Yeah. Used to be more hodgepodge.
Well, I like that you have artwork on the walls. It's just interesting. When you walk in, it's interesting looking. And I never feel like I come into an empty building. And so I like that change. I like seeing the variety of ages here. There was...
Do you think that's unique to Fourscore? More than other places?
I never go.
I feel like it is.
I never go to another coffee shop.
Thank you. That's the right answer.
I have never seen. Well, there was one where I used to take Grandpa when he had Alzheimer's. I would drop him off at a place, and there was another coffee shop in the parking lot area.
Yeah.
And I went in there, and they had some sofas where people could sit, and they had tables along by the windows. And first day I dropped Grandpa off, I went in there and got coffee and sat in one of those tables and just cried because that was a big step to admit that he needed to be somewhere other than with me. And I thought no one was noticing me because I had a book in front of me and was kind of up against the wall. And on the way out, a lady that was kind of standing along there, she'd had her order already, but I guess she'd been observing. And as I walked by, and she said, "Is there something I can help you with?" She said, "I notice you're having a problem." And I thought, that's sweet. Because so many of people there were so self-involved.
Yeah.
I thought no one's even noticing, I'm getting away with it. I can sit here and cry and no one's noticing. But they were.
Yeah.
They were caring about it. And one of the things that I loved one day when I saw it here before COVID, that table full of elderly people my age playing cards.
Yeah.
And I thought, they're just coming here camping and playing cards, and Luke lets him. No, you didn't try to break it up or anything like that.
There are many, I think, myths that people hold on to, and they have people ask me the same question all the time, all different types of people too. They say, how do you keep people from staying too long? And that's it, to me, in my business philosophy, it is a myth. And I know that it's a problem for some people. Maybe your coffee shop's across the street from a college and students sit there for 6 hours. But to me, it can never be a pure problem if there's all the seats are full. It can't be a pure problem. It can be maybe an obstacle to growth because you might have people coming in who cannot sit down now.
Yeah.
But it's not just a problem like the shop's burning down with fire. That's a problem. But it's a good problem. It is something that requires innovation and maybe a little bit, maybe you need to expand your seating. Maybe you need to open another location. But when people want to come and sit and enjoy your space, whether it's playing cards or opening up their laptop or having a business meeting, or there's a gentleman who sat and tutored students for hours. And I mean, he makes money tutoring students in our space. But the fact that he's here to me is more important than the fact that he's taking up a seat. So that's been my business philosophy, and I think it's worked.
Have you ever seen any statistics on what the turnover needs to be to keep it profitable?
I haven't. I think that's something I would need to look at in the future. But right now, I just take it organically.
Great. As long as you're able to pay your staff and make a living for yourself, and now that you're a father, you've got different responsibilities.
Right.
But as long as it's going okay, you keep doing what you're doing. I am very proud of you, Luke.
Oh, thank you.
I mention often, my grandson has a coffee house. Where is it? Most people have never heard of historic old Roseville.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
But I'll say, well, it's by the Boxing Donkey or by Pacific Cafe. And quite often they'll know one or the other.
Where one of those is, yeah.
But it's with great pride that I say that, because I know if they come here, they're going to have a good experience.
Thank you. Well, it's been an amazing journey. And like I said at the beginning, you've been really influential with things that you've told me. And I think that even more than that, things that I learned from you over my childhood and being around you and Grandpa and my parents, and the things that you influenced in my mom's life that she passed on to me have been hugely instrumental in making me the person that I am. And so I wanted to share you with people, and hopefully encouraging some people as they listen and watch and understand that, I didn't do it all by myself, and no one should try to do it all by themselves, but they should rely on others who've gone before them.
There are some people who have put up walls between the generations, and they don't want to hear it from their parents or their grandparents. They're quite happy figuring it out by themselves. And I feel blessed that you do not have that attitude, and that you include us in the experience as you were making decisions. I know you asked or told me about the locations you were considering, and I felt this was the worst choice you could make.
Might have been still. Yeah. The other ones might have done much better.
Well, you didn't change direction, and it's a wonder, when I see people standing around outside, and I appreciate the fact that you choose not to be open on Sunday. Mm. I think that's a decision that's hard to make.
It is.
But I think that it's been honored in many ways, and you've gotten recognition and brought business in through other ways that being open on Sunday might not have made the difference. So
business is all about making hard decisions and just charging forward despite what other people might think.
When you're talking about making decisions, having a store like I did, a salesman would come in with several books of fabric lines and color lines, making decisions about which we will choose. You don't choose everything because you can't.
Right.
So what's going to sell and what isn't going to sell, and you don't have a chance to second guess it. The season comes and it sells, or the season leaves and it's left over. Fortunately, that doesn't happen with coffee, I don't think.
Not as bad.
It's pretty much year round. So the decisions that you make are totally different than the kind of decision that I made in my business. But we're all making decisions based on the needs of our customer and what's available to offer to the customer. And with careful concern, you trust that decision that you're making is the one that's going to help you be successful. And I think you've done a great job in doing that, Luke.
Thank you. Well, you heard it here first on the Proclamation podcast. Joan Connelly, entrepreneur extraordinaire, my grandmother, our guest today. Thank you for being with us. This has been the Proclamation podcast. So we'll leave you once again with that we all have to make decisions and we all have to deal with the consequences of our decisions, but continuing to plunge forward and to encourage one another with these conversations and with these stories. So thank you for sharing your story with us and being here today, Grandma.
My pleasure.